the author of Inside Hamas, the Untold Story of the Militant Islamic Movement, joining us on the telephone from London. Welcome to Democracy Now! Zaki Chehab, tell us how Hamas began and what it is that they are demanding now.
In fact, what according to what Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh statement yesterday, a televised statement, he did ask that they would accept any agreement which would put an end for the Israeli attack or invasion into Gaza Strip, but definitely Hamas and other Palestinian factions definitely they want really something extremely clear. As there were 7 months ago a ceasefire which was being brokered between Israel and Hamas by Egypt, but unfortunately Israel have not respected the agreement. They did not fulfill the commitments they made when they reached it. Between these is to open the border and the crossing points between Gaza and Egypt, between Gaza and to let people go to the West Bank, to stop targeting Palestinian activists. Hamas, the first few months of this ceasefire, have respected it fully, to the extent that they have arrested other Palestinian activists who were in the process or tried to fire rocket attacks against southern Israel. So practically Hamas have respected the agreement. The one who have not fulfilled that part is Israel, where Israel have by the end of November last year have assassinated more than 30 Palestinian activists. Really, the failure of Israel to respect this commitment, the starvation of more than 750,000 Palestinians living in refugees camps in Gaza, as you heard it from UN officials or from non-governmental organizations, was extremely clear, and it really expressed the frustration of the Palestinians in Gaza, to the extent that Hamas found itself, that why we have to respect the agreement Israel have not respected in the first place. So that's where the firing of the rockets started from Gaza towards Israeli cities.
Can you tell us about Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader in Gaza? I'm looking at a piece that the Haaretz reporter Amira Haas wrote, a couple of months ago, where the Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was meeting with 11 European parliamentarians who sailed from Cyprus to the Gaza Strip to protest Israel's naval blockade. Haniyeh told his guests Israel rejected his initiative. Claire Short, who served in the cabinet of the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, asked Haniyeh to repeat his offer. He said the Hamas government had agreed to accept a Palestinian state that followed the 67 borders and to offer Israel a long-term truce if Israel recognized Palestinians' national rights.
In fact, before Ismail Haniyeh said this, Khalid Mash'al told President Jimmy Carter these things. It was extremely open. Even before these things, we have to remind, I think, many in the world that when the talks between Fatah and Hamas took place in Saudi Arabia and Mecca, and it was at that time brokered by King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, it was very clear Hamas have accepted all the agreements signed between the Palestinian Authority and the State of Israel, which is really include, the recognition of the State of Israel. Unfortunately, the West refused to take whatever Hamas pledges made at that time, and which really led that, more extreme elements within the movement have told the moderates, what we are getting out of this. There are others who have recognized the State of Israel, but still 13 years of negotiation, have not really achieved Palestinian goals. Israel have not respected any of the agreements. So why we have to recognize the State of Israel? What is going to be the price for such recognition? I think, what's really needed at this stage, if we want to pressurize Hamas, if we want to get a clear commitment from them about recognizing the State of Israel, is that Israel have to come out and in the open, a very clear message by the United Nations or by, some respected governments, to tell the world that if Hamas recognize the State of Israel, if they denounced what's so-called terrorism and violence, then Israel would be, in a year's time, within a very specific time scale, would give the Palestinians an independent state where they can live in dignity, have the right for freedom of movement and all sorts of things. That's what really needed, You going into Gaza have not achieved anything. in spite of more than 17 days of these continuous attacks. Missiles are still being fired at Israeli cities, and it's going to continue. And, I consider it's true that there's the heavy fighting for the last 17 days, but I can tell you Israel have made no achievement in the heavily populated area. What they have been through is very open space in the suburbs of Gaza, around Gaza, but, they have not made a very, specific achievement in any of the neighborhoods for the last 9 days of heavy fighting. So practically what's really Hamas and other Palestinian factions are looking for is to see Israel coming close to these populated area, because as you know, these movements, these factions are guerrilla. They are fighting guerrilla force. They are not regular armies. So that we don't expect them to face Israeli forces like, somewhere in the open. So what really, other Palestinian fighters are looking for is that the real battle, in my experience, have not started yet. Tomorrow when we see Israeli forces entrenched and staying in Gaza and around Gaza, they need their supplies regularly, and that's where the attacks will take place, where the most injuries and victims of Israeli soldiers will happen. And that's why I think the Israeli politicians have to think twice about what's going to be the next step.
Zaki Chehab, the Israeli government says if Hamas stops firing rockets into Israel, they'll stop the attack.
I think the reason of the whole thing is not a matter of firing attacks. What we need is a proper, vision of what's going to happen. There was ceasefire before, but for how long you can hold a ceasefire? What we need is a solution. What we need is a plan to end the Israeli occupation of West Bank and Gaza. Without such a clear plan, attacks is going to take place, and people is not going to leave Israel live in peace. We are occupied people. We have occupied territory, and the United Nations have given the people who are under occupation the mandate to fight the occupier. So the Palestinians have the right to fight the occupation. There were stages where there was peace in Palestine, where Palestinians said, okay, let's give peace a chance. After 1993, Washington Agreement, there was peace in Gaza and West Bank for more than a year and a half, 2 years, because the Palestinians were having hope. We have not seen attacks against Israeli forces, although they were in Gaza. Because the hope that, we have a peace now, let's give the peace a chance, because we are going to get an independent state and they'll do it. But 13 years of negotiation have not given the Palestinian, anything. They still, if they want to take a patient with a kidney failure or need a heart transplant, he needs a permission from the Israeli forces. Hundreds of people over the last few years have been dying on the border just waiting for permission. So for how long, the suffering of the people in Gaza?
Zaki Chehab, we're going to have to leave it there.
Nearly now 950 people killed, thousands of people injured. But still, we need a clear vision where a ceasefire will take us.
Zaki Chehab, thank you very much for being with us, political editor of the London-based Al Hayat newspaper and Arabic TV channel LBC. His book is called Inside Hamas, The Untold Story of the Militant Islamic Movement, and that does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Will be doing extended coverage, 2-hour broadcasts on Inauguration Day and the day after. Go to our website, democracynow.org, for details. I'll be interviewing Louise Erdrich on January 14th in New York. Check our website. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.